The whole tract of land known as Gokula. Sarvam, everywhere. Avrinvan, covering. Mushnan, taking away. Chakshumshi, power of vision. Reinamehi, by particles of dust. Irayan was vibrating. Sumahagura, very fierce and heavy. Shabdena, with a sound. Vadishadishaha, entered everywhere in all directions. So translation, covering the whole land of Gokula with particles of dust, that demon, acting as a strong whirlwind, covered everyone's vision and began vibrating everywhere with a greatly fearful sound. Repeat, covering the whole land of Gokula with particles of dust, that demon, acting as a strong whirlwind, covered everyone's vision and began vibrating everywhere with a greatly fearful sound. So, purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai. Shrinavarta Sura assumed the form of the whirlwind and covered with a dust storm the whole tract of land known as Gokula, so that no one could even see the nearest thing. So, very short purport. So, text 22. Urdam abhavan gostam rajasatam asavritam sutam yashodana pashat tasmin yastavati ataha. For a moment, the whole pasturing ground was overcast with dense darkness from the dust storm, and Mother Yashoda was unable to find her son where she had placed him. Text 23. Napashyat kaschanat manam param chapi vimoditaha navartan ani shrishtabhi sarkarabhir upadrutaha. Because of the bits of sand thrown about by Trinavarta, people could not see themselves or anyone else, and thus they were illusioned and disturbed. Text 24. Itikara pavana chakra pamshivarshe sutaparavim aballa vilaksha mata atikarunam anusmarancha shochad ubipatikta mrita vatsaka yatagao. Because of the dust storm stirred up by the strong whirlwind, Mother Yashoda could find no trace of her son, nor could she understand why. Thus she fell down on the ground like a cow who has lost her calf and began to lament very pitifully. Text 25. Uditam anunishamya tatragopya prasham anutap Tadiyo Shru Purnamukya Ruduranu Palapya Nanda Soon Om Avana Bharata Pamshuvar Shavege. When the force of the dust storm and the wind subsided, Yashoda's friends, the other gopis, approached Mother Yashoda, hearing her pitiful crying. Not seeing Krishna present, they too felt very much aggrieved and joined Mother Yashoda in crying, their eyes full of tears. So, Srila Prabhupada's purport. This attachment of the gopis to Krishna is wonderful and transcendental. The center of all the activities of the gopis was Krishna. When Krishna was there, they were happy. And when Krishna was not there, they were unhappy. Thus, when Mother Yashoda was lamenting Krishna's absence, the other ladies also began to cry. Actually, we talked about this. So, Om Gana Timidandasha Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshur Unmiritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So many people have the conception of the spiritual world, liberation, etc., as something like a utopia. For those of you who don't know what the word utopia means, that means something that's everything's perfect, everyone's smiling all the time, no distress, just peace and love, something like the hippies were thinking of instituting in the 1960s. Utopia, back to the, as there was this interesting song, Back to the Garden of Eden. So, where everybody was just naked with fig leaves on. So, fortunately, the spiritual world is not like that. Now, why am I saying fortunately the spiritual world is not like that? And wouldn't it be a lot nicer to have everybody just smiling all the time and jolly and joking? What is this crying business? Of course, you can say, well, this is just Krishna's pastimes in the material world. But actually, in the spiritual world, these particular types of emotions are manifest too. If you read the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, you get a chance to hear about what's happening in the spiritual world, but not only Krishna's pastimes that are manifested in this world, because there is some difference. There is some difference in the pastimes. For example, in the spiritual realm, there are no demons, but they talk of demons. And in the material realm, there are actual demons, or sometimes devotees acting as demons, but there's actual killing in the material realm. In the spiritual realm, there can't be any killing because that's described. Ashnavi Ram, the spiritual body doesn't have any veins. It's you can't kill Satchidananda. The spiritual body and the soul are one and the same. There's no duality. The material world, the soul is different than the body. The spiritual world, the soul is the body. The spiritual body is no difference. So, anyway, there is some difference, but the intensity of emotions is also there in the spiritual world. So if you read the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, you'll hear about Krishna leaving to go to kill Kamsa, although there's no Kamsa, and he doesn't have to kill him, but still, he leaves Goloka, or the case may be. Sometimes the word Gokul is used in different contexts to indicate the spiritual world, sometimes to indicate pastimes in this world. So anyway, he leaves the residence of Braj, and apparently he goes to Mathura, and the residents of Braj are just like completely, let's say, upset, crying. First of all, they tried to stop his charity. That was the first anxiety, and they gave Akrura the name, not cruel. I mean, he had the name already, not cruel, but they said he's Krura. He's not Akrura. Anyway, and then you find pastimes like Srimati Radharani and the gopis just like lying in front of the cart, and the cart has to zigzag out of Braj just to take Krishna out. And they're in complete anxiety, and then Krishna comes back. And then a little while later, or a few days later, the same pastime happens. Krishna leaves, he comes back. Of course, in the material world, you don't really find too many descriptions of Krishna coming back. You'll find in some of the Acharya's writings, at least not in the Bhagavatam, Krishna coming back to Vrindavan. I mean, in the material world, you have the gopis and the residents of Vrindavan left for about 125 years. Of course, they do see Krishna in Kurukshetra, attempt to bring him back to Vrindavan. But you find them left there just not completely bereft, crying becoming crazy, basically. And so, anyway, and then there's this other story, Tamrita, where Krishna jumps into the Kaliya lake to chastise the Kaliya serpent, and he seems to be entwined in the Kaliya's coils. And all the residents of Vrindavan, they're being stopped by Balaram from jumping in, but they're practically on the point of death, and Balaram yells at Krishna, hey, these aren't just like Vaikuntha attendants here, Krishna. They'll die if you continue like this. Because Krishna thinks, okay, enough playing around. And he starts to dance on the heads of the Kaliya serpent, entertain the residents of Vrindavan. So why does Krishna torture his poor, pure devotees like that? Now, I can understand why Krishna tortures the devotees who are not pure. Yashaha Mano Riname Harishe Tetaram Shanai, because, we have so many attachments in this world. And, it's just like if you go to a dentist, it's obvious the dentist hopefully will pull the rotten teeth out. Because nowadays, you never know. But he's not going to start pulling the good teeth out. So why is Krishna pulling all the teeth out? Anyway, but in the material world, it's understandable because we have all these attachments, and Krishna just really has to show us the naked face of the material energy. Actually, Prabhupada said that in that one poem, I think it's the Vrindavan Bhajan. Now I have seen the naked reality of this material world. And it's pretty heavy. We see people die, we see conflicts, read the news, see certain politicians who remain nameless. It's all part of Krishna's plan to teach us things. And even or even, let's say, some devotee asked me the question the other day, what happens if you're not quite pure? Is there a chance we can enter into Krishna's pastimes? And I said, yes, for sometimes, like in the case of certain gopis who weren't quite all the way up to, well, I hate to use the word snuff, but anyway, up to the highest platform, they were put in this situation in Krishna's Bhoma Leela, earthly pastimes, where Krishna would play his flute, and their husbands would prevent them from joining Krishna. And it was so intense, the call of the flute of Krishna was so intense for them that they left their material bodies and went to join Krishna, and that was their final purification. So that sometimes happens. Even if you're not completely pure, because the general procedure, if you're not completely pure, is if you're very advanced, you take birth in a family of transcendentalists, and if you're not so advanced, you go to the heavenly planets, take birth in a rich Jewish family. Sorry, a Gujarati family. You get a chance to execute, sorry. Actually, they call the Gujarati people Indian Jews. So then you get a chance to execute devotional service in the next life. But sometimes you actually get a chance to be in Krishna's pastime and get on the earth planet, not in the spiritual world, and get that final purification. Just like the intense, I can't go to join Krishna. Krishna's flute is playing, and his stupid husband won't let me go to see him. Just give up this body. So intense. Actually, emotionally, if someone is in the proper emotional state, they can actually give up their body. Just like you see sometimes when a husband dies or wife dies and they've been together for many years and they love each other. One will pass away and the other one will pass away shortly after that. That happens quite often, actually. So emotional states can actually devastate the material body. So anyway, I can understand that. But why in the spiritual world is Krishna doing these same things, putting the devotees into this intense anxiety or feeling separation from him or worried about his safety? Well, that deepens the relationship between Krishna and the devotees. You may say, well, they already have a deep relationship. But in the spiritual realm, or in the relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, your loving propensity can expand unlimitedly. Prabhupada gives that example. He talks about a light. And you can shine a light in a box, and the light just like, I guess, hits the edges of the box. Or you can shine it into space and it goes on a long, especially if it's a laser beam. It goes on a long distance. So devotees, ultimately, this is their enjoyment, and this is Krishna's enjoyment too. To intensify the bhavas or the emotions. Understand? Because that's happiness. Simply to be in a utopia where everybody's smiling some stupid smile. You know, my mother used to say, wipe that smile off your face. So, some brainless smile. I mean, what's the happiness in that? It's like going to the Brahman effulgence, basically. It's a negation of all suffering. But the happiness is having extreme emotions. And just like you hear about the bhavas being described by Srila Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti of Bhakti Sindhu. You know, we've mentioned this many times before. He talks about the Yabachari bhavas, Sanchari bhavas, which 33 of those, you know, bhavas that actually overcome your consciousness, intermittent, you don't know when they're coming. The Satvika bhavas, the Anubhavas, all these things are actually part of the enjoyment. I mean, even in this material world, people will go to a movie, for example, to experience sadness or fear, right? When I was young, I used to go to the horror movies. And, you know, it was actually, you know, misery. Or people will get on one of these roller coasters to experience some sort of like suspicion, you know, fear, whatever they experience. God knows what they experience. Because that's happiness. So in the case of these extreme emotions here, this is Yashoda Maya's happiness because it's her love for Krishna. And it's Krishna's happiness because the devotees are getting closer and closer to him by these extreme emotions. So we shouldn't think that this is a place where we don't want to go because in the spiritual world there'll be so much crying. And so also we can understand the way to become Krishna conscious is to have these extreme emotions. Volume. Volume, of course, is Hare Krishna. Volume is translated as, you know, greed, intense greed. It's not just ordinary greed. Like it's an intensity of an emotion where one really wants something. And that's the price of pure devotional service, or as Prabhupada said sometimes, the price of pure devotional service is tears. So how do we develop these emotions in relationship to Krishna as we're performing Bhakti Yoga? We have to develop an intense desire to be with Krishna. And how do we develop an intense desire to be with Krishna? We hear about Krishna. When you hear about Krishna, you know, I hear about these things. I just think, wow, I wish I was there. I mean, it's not really intense at this point. You know, with me, it's just like, well, it'd be nice if I was there. So that intensity of emotion can first be manifest in relationship to the spiritual master. I mean, right now, it may be hard to actually think, you know, I really want to be in the spiritual world. Of course, we may be wanting liberation to get out of this world, but we should develop this attachment, especially in our Krishna consciousness movement. We should be developing this attachment for His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. I mean, we have our guru, obviously, we should be attached to him, but or her in the future, if we happen to be fortunate enough to get the ultra-conservatives to relinquish their hold on the Gaudiya Vaishnava practices. But it's important to develop that sort of attachment for Prabhupada. Now, what does that mean? How do you develop that attachment for Prabhupada? I mean, of course, you hear about Prabhupada, hear different pastimes or different activities that Prabhupada executed. You associate with those who are devoted to Prabhupada. And ultimately, you try to understand Srila Prabhupada's mission, as described, and we've spoken about this many times before, that Bkgoswami is known as our main acharya. We are Rupas because Sri Chaitanya Mano Vishnu, Stapitam Yena. That Srila Bkgoswami has understood the intention, mood, desire, mission, the mind of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Mano Vishnu, isn't it? He's understood the mind, which when you talk about the mind, it means intention, mood, mission, everything like that of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he's considered, even though Sanatana Goswami is his elder, in one sense, his Siksha Guru, we approach through, I'm not saying that Sanatana Goswami didn't understand the intention, he did, obviously, but Bkgoswami understood, and therefore he published, wouldn't use the word published, you use the word write, because those days you didn't publish. He wrote books such as the Bhakti Rasa Sinda, Ujjwala and Niyamani, for those who are more advanced, step-by-step directions on how to be Krishna conscious. So anyway, so we have to be in that same, let's say, same dedication in relationship to Prabhupada. So in our society, in our Krishna conscious society, we need some training of the devotees, because I've found that that understanding of Srila Prabhupada, not just the stories, Srila Prabhupada did this, Srila Prabhupada did that, but that understanding of Srila Prabhupada's mission, desire, intention, or even position are not there in general. Many devotees, the second, third generation devotees. So there needs to be certain training like that, not just the ISKCON disciple course, but perhaps some other books, literatures, courses, videos, so that people can connect with Srila Prabhupada in a very deep emotional way too. Just like you see the Christians, they are connecting, many of them are connecting to Jesus Christ in a very emotional way. And I'm not saying that every case is like that, but I've experienced many cases they have a deep emotional connection with Jesus Christ, even though, he appeared or disappeared over 2,000 years ago. So, sometimes devotees say, well, Prabhupada was your spiritual master, you knew him, you were on the planet, or he was on the planet when you were part of the movement. But that's really not that consequential. Not that consequential. Whether someone was on, because we see that many Prabhupada disciples never met Prabhupada, never were in the physical presence of Prabhupada, but because the discussion in the movement was always about Prabhupada, they felt that connection with Prabhupada. You were hearing letters from Prabhupada, and we sent to the temples. You were hearing about where Prabhupada was. Practically every day, that was the center point of the discussion. Even when I first joined the movement, every morning we would have, this was Sasrup Maharshi for this, every morning we would have a 10 minutes or 15 minutes of a, those days, tape. Don't know what a tape is. Sorry about that. I mean, anyway, MP3, wasn't MP3, tape. And we'd listen to Prabhupada. In the beginning, none of us can understand what Prabhupada was saying. But then, since we were being questioned, it's not that we were just like sitting there listening to tape. After the tape was played, this is just one thing that could be done. After the tape was played, Saswarup Maharaj, of course he was married at that time, Saswarup, he would ask us, what did Prabhupada say? At the beginning, I said, I didn't understand a word. Because of the accent. I was just listening this morning to an interview that Prabhupada had about the moon. When it's, there's some reporter trying to corner Srila Prabhupada. Said, you say it's impossible they would go to the moon? Prabhupada said, no, that's not like this. And the reporter said, what did you say? I didn't understand it. Had to repeat because the reporter wouldn't understand the accent. So that's what I mean. Perhaps different procedures, mechanisms, or things that should be done in our society so that people can actually hear Srila Prabhupada and understand Srila Prabhupada and develop that emotional, intense. I'm not that I'm just tuning my own concho. So, I know that when I see a picture of Prabhupada or hear about Prabhupada, there's this deep emotional response there. And that's really what keeps me going in the Krishna conscious movement. So these deep emotions, the feelings of separation, oh no, it's not time yet, have to be awoken in the hearts of the devotees if we're going to be unified and succeed in the mission of Krishna consciousness. And sometimes the emotions will be painful. Like Mother Yashoda here, she's experienced this separation from Krishna, anxiety about Krishna's, just like painful emotion would be an anxiety about Prabhupada's movement, just like, sometimes I'm in anxiety about Prabhupada's movement. How is it going to go on? We have, we mentioned the other day that we have a variety of different viewpoints. Prabhupada said unity and diversity, or diversity. So how to bring together this unity in spite of all the diversity. So this is anxiety. So this anxiety is good. How to spread Krishna consciousness, how to make devotees, how to keep Prabhupada's movement together and keep the devotees faithful to Prabhupada's movement. So we're not decrying emotions. So any questions or comments about these points? Yes. Yeah. Well, the emotion has to be based not just on, what Prabhupada did or is doing for me, but what I can do for Prabhupada. Just like one famous American politician said, ask not what your country can do for you, but, ask what you can do for your country. So it has to be, pleasing Prabhupada. If it's simply based, like we see in many Christians, the emotion is based on, Jesus died for my sins, the blood of the Lamb, which is actually a speculation that was simply came out due to Napoleon influence on the church. I've actually been reading a little bit of church history recently. Church history revealed, and it turns out that, the apostles, the actual direct apostles of Jesus Christ differed greatly in their understanding of what Jesus Christ's mission was from Paul. And, some people are questioning actually Paul's motives. But I don't want to get into it. Because he was actually, anyway, he turned the whole church 180 degrees in the other direction. So anyway, so we in other words, we shouldn't think that, Prabhupada took away my sins or something like that, like Jesus died for my sins. But we should think what the mood should be, Prabhupada's mission. What can we do to please Prabhupada? And we should feel guilty, nothing wrong with healthy guilt. what have I done for Prabhupada? Like Prabhupada had some expectation. He wanted us to do, especially he said, you American boys and girls, because that's all we were at that time, boys and girls. But he expected us to do miracles. And so there should be that relationship, like a parental relationship, basically. Like you want to please, your parents. You want your parents to say, oh, you did well in school, or you didn't join the Hare Krishna movement. I mean, that's a funny example. But it's that loving relationship to please the person you love. So that's a very deep relationship, not simply some crocodile tears, and emotions. Oh, Prabhupada, telling Prabhupada stories. It has to be pleasing Prabhupada. And yes, there should be some guilty feelings. What have I done for Prabhupada? And I think like that sometimes too. Like, what have I done for Prabhupada? I'm going to leave this world without having done anything substantial for Prabhupada. So those emotions are good. Guilt is good in those circumstances. And intense, hankering is good. The Krishna conscious movement is meant for intense emotions. Thank you. So confirmed. All glories to His divine grace. Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai.